Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a book review on I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which is the first book in a series of books of Maya Angelou recounting her own biography. So stay tuned and welcome to a literary odyssey where we love to read, but we love the journey even more. So let me first off start by saying this book was beautifully written. When I received this book, I didn't even purchase it myself. My mother-in-law just thought, hey, one day she had it on her shelf, she didn't read it, and she thought maybe I would enjoy it, I guess, based off of prior books that I have read. I decided to pick it up and read it because I don't like to have books in my possession just sitting around or not read. So I picked it up and I actually really started to enjoy it. I thought it was very well written. I knew going into it, I apologize, my cat is scratching on the floor. I knew going into it that it was going to be a biography written by Maya Angelou talking about her life. However, I did not know it was a book series. So as I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is so beautifully well written. It reads like a novel. And I was kind of waiting to get to the points where she was an adult and when she started doing her activism. But it continued to go on as she was a child, and then I eventually paused and researched and realized this book is the first book in a series of 7 books total detailing her biography. So I think her idea to write her biography from very critical, important moments in her life in separate books as if it was a novel was an amazing idea. So my first point is beautifully well written. I could visualize the whole book in my head. Like I said before, this is a coming of age book in a series of books detailing her biography. Very early on in the book, it is sad. I never knew. When I think of Maya Angelou, I think of this amazing woman who has inflicted and impacted so much change on the world. But I never thought to think that maybe that strong-willed woman came from a broken childhood. It never crossed my mind. So early on in the book, we're already introduced to the sad, kind of debilitating early life that she had. So her parents split, I believe, when she was 3 and her brother Bailey 4. The parents decided to pretty much ship them off to her grandma. So she already had a sense at an early age that she was abandoned. She somehow didn't think that she was an orphan because she's not an orphan, but she receives a gift from her parents and it really, really affects her because for a long time she just assumed that they were dead because she couldn't understand how parents could just abandon their children. But she was given to their grandmother, and their grandmother was a very strong figure, a very supportive figure. But then as the story goes on, we are introduced to some incidents of segregation and some incidents that involve the KKK. Maya Angelou, even though she lived in a time of segregation, she truly had no experience with white people. She actually considered them the others, and she couldn't fathom their day-to-day life because she just really didn't have any interactions with them. It wasn't until she became an early preteen, I believe, that she got hired by this white woman, and she did not appreciate the fact that instead of calling her Marguerite or Maya, she decided to call her Mary for her own convenience, and Maya Angelou was not having it. She was like, okay, you want to play games? So she broke the white woman's like favorite fish dish. So that was kind of like her first retaliation back at white people. And I hate to say it like that, but that's That's how they're portrayed in the book. And then we continue to go on to hear of horrific incidents happening to African American people. And there was an incident where her crippled uncle had to hide inside of a barrel for safety because an incident occurred where an African American man allegedly spoke to a white woman, or I made an advance at a white woman, and so it riled up the KKK. And so even though the uncle did absolutely nothing, he was very fearful of his life and he had to hide. So it was kind of like a light on segregation and the horrific conditions and fears that African Americans had to go through. I would say, though, that in the beginning, I would laugh, and I thought I loved the relationship that she had with her brother Bailey in the beginning. I was laughing hysterically when I read the scene of them in the church, that one woman was going insane because she wouldn't go to church every Sunday, but when she would go, she would make this big spectacle as if she was trying to make up for the time she did not go to church. It was just a hilarious scene where Maya and her brother Bailey just had me cracking up because they were making fun of this woman, talking about preach it. If you read the book, you'll know the scene, and it was very funny. So I thought her relationship with her brother in the beginning was amazing, what you would want siblings to act like, or at least what I would want my two boys to act like with each other. However, somewhere later on in her age, about 7 years old, closer to 8, Maya's father decides in the middle of the night he's just going to come and, scoop up the kids and bring them to the mom. When they brought Maya and Bailey to the mom, Bailey was head over heels with the mom. He thought she was beautiful, and he was just so happy to be out of Stamps where they lived with the grandma. The mother had a live-in boyfriend, Mr. Freeman, and sadly, Mr. Freeman molested Maya in the beginning and then eventually ultimately raped her at the age of 8. And this scene caught me so off guard that I wasn't prepared for it. I had to shut the book because I could not envision such a strong woman going through such an assault at such a young age. Like, it wasn't even the fact that it was Maya Angelou. I just could not imagine someone performing an act on an 8-year-old like that. That was devastating to me. I had to close the book because I'm a 3rd grade teacher and my students are 8 years old, and that shocked me. It shocked me. And then I ended up doing some research to see if this was true, and I found the news article detailing it. So I was shocked. I was sad that she had to go through that at such a young age. And as a result of her rape, the family took the man to court. He was convicted of rape, found guilty, and he was sentenced to 1 year and 1 day. However, his lawyer managed to get him out in a day, and within that day that he was out, he was viciously murdered, beaten to death. And I still hold true that it was her family who did it, but, there's no proof of that. No one ever caught who killed Mr. Freeman. But due to this, Maya became a mute for a little while because before her rape, she actually felt a connection to Mr. Freeman. And so when he was murdered, she felt like it was her voice that caused his demise. And so she was terrified to use her voice again because she thought that it would hurt someone else. So she became a mute for a little bit. Because of this, her parents or her mother kind of got fed up with her and sent her back to Stamps to her grandma. However, her time back in Stamps, she met a woman who was able to help her to speak again because she gave her books, she gave her poetry, pretty much literature. And so this woman helped Maya Angelou, in essence, to find her voice again. Now, as we continue to talk about how unstable her life was, when she returned to Stamps, things progressively gotten worse with the KKK and the mistreatment of African Americans. And what ultimately sent them back to their parents was her brother Bailey had stumbled upon a dead corpse of an African American man in a lake. And he was somewhat traumatized at the bloatedness of the body. However, he brought people to the body pretty much to remove it from where it was. There was a white man there who actually relished in seeing this body, and Bailey was conflicted by the joy that was coming from this man from seeing a dead African American man. So the grandmother decided that things were getting too bad again. She raised money and she ultimately sent the children back to their mom. At this time, I believe Maya Angelou was 13 or 14. I'm not really sure because I didn't keep her chronological age, but when she was with her mother remarried. There wasn't issues with the father or anything like that. However, Maya asked to spend a summer with her father. So she goes off. Her father is a drunk. He takes her to Mexico where he ends up like leaving her in the car. She doesn't even know how to drive and she takes his car because he's drunk and he's in the back seat and she just wants to leave wherever he took her to. And so she decides to drive this car down a very, very steep, dangerous mountain. She succeeded, but by the time she got back to the border, she hit another car. Her father wakes up. He talks to the guy at the border, drinks with him, and they're fine. But when she returns back home, the father's fiance gets into an argument with the father. He storms off. Maya Angelou felt bad. She goes to the future wife of her father and she's like, hey, I really didn't try to get in between you and my father. The woman was not having it. She was calling Maya Angelou names and she ultimately called Maya Angelou's mother a whore. And so Maya Angelou decided to slap her. And since she slapped her, the woman attacked her, stabbed her. She was able to get away, but the father took her to these people that she didn't know to try to heal her. So while she was there, her father was off. She decided to abandon the home he took her to. And she found herself in a junkyard. Now, this part of the book was kind of odd because she fell asleep in a car in a junkyard. When she awoke, there was a bunch of kids there. And in essence, these kids were the junkyard kids. They helped each other to survive, but you knew that they were abandoned children or runaways. So there wasn't really any obligation or anything from one another, but they had their little rules like, hey, you don't sleep in other people's cars and you try to help out as much as you can. So Maya Angelou spent the remaining portion of her summer there, just being a junkyard kid. And what's sad is that she felt more acceptance and love from the abandoned and the runaway children than she did with her own mother and father. However, after the summer, she decides to call her mother, who sent her a plane ticket, and she goes back home. When she's back home, she kind of is conflicted with her body. She feels like she needs to have a boyfriend. And so she takes it upon her to seriously just go up to a guy. She pinpointed her guy on who she wanted. And as he was passing her, she was brave. And she just said, hey, you want to have intercourse? And this kid just looked at her and was like, what? Are you serious? So he was like, yeah, sure. So he takes her to his apartment or wherever he was residing at. They have a very short intercourse. There was no love or anything involved in that. But ultimately it led to her pregnancy. And so Maya decides to hide her pregnancy from her mom. She tells her brother in a letter because her brother ends up leaving the house because he goes through his own coming of age and he gets into a little bit of trouble, but he ends up leaving because he wants to become a man. So she sends a letter to him and she's like, hey, I got myself into some trouble. He tells her, hide it as much as you can. And so she does. And eventually Maya does tell her mother and her stepfather. They do not disown her or anything there like that. They simply said, hey, girls have been getting pregnant and since Eve ate the apple. It is what it is. We're going to support you. And I thought that was great, because I can't imagine what it was like at that time being 16 in that decade and being pregnant and not telling the father or being married to the father. But the parents were very accepting of it and they helped her. So Maya ended up having a baby boy at the age of 16. She's just in love with her boy. And so the book ends with her embracing motherhood at a very young age. But I thought this book was so well written. It was beautiful. And I am excited to read the next 6 books in her series regarding her biography. Other than that, yeah, amazing book. And I hope you pick it up and you enjoy it yourself. I know I did a lot of spoilers, but it's still an amazing book to read, even though you kind of know the premise. So I hope you pick it up and you enjoy it the way that I did.